Hey, what's up folks? How's it going? This is Watch for MW Technology, and today I'm going to be doing a head-to-head camera comparison between the Google Pixel 10 Pro versus the iPhone 17 Pro Max. We're going to be specifically talking about the rear-facing cameras, but right now you're looking at the front-facing 4K 60FPS video capture capabilities. And specifically on the new iPhone, we have a new sensor at the front, which is a square 18 megapixel sensor, so you can actually shoot with it in landscape and portrait mode no matter what way you're holding the phone, which is pretty cool. But we're going to just move around a little bit so you can see kind of the dynamic range of the front facing cameras. I'm inside right now, and outside you can see that it's pretty sunny and bright. And if we switch around, the audio exposure should kind of compensate. But love to know what you guys think of the overall skin tones of the front-facing video. Which one do you think actually looks more pleasing to the eye? But we're going to take a look at outside footage, both in video and stills, and then we're going to take a look at the low-light performance as well. Not to mention the zoom and ultra-wide capabilities of both smartphones to determine which one has the best camera. Now, I just want to talk to you about my initial impressions on the camera of the iPhone 17 Pro Max versus the Pixel 10 Pro. Now, you can see that in this shot, it's a very high dynamic range shot where we have a bright window outside, and inside the kitchen is very dark. The iPhone actually renders out the image quite naturally. It doesn't over-sharpen much of the image, and many of the shadow details are nicely preserved. And although you could see a little bit of noise, there are more details in the shadow versus on the Pixel 10 Pro. It tends to boost up the contrast ratio quite a bit, so it crushes some of those blacks and you lose some of those midtones within the shadows themselves. And it does have a little bit of over sharpened artifacts, in my opinion, versus the iPhone is a lot more natural. But one thing that the iPhone does in this scene over here is it kind of distorts the highlight a little bit. So if we look at the far distance trees, you can see that many of the branches of the trees are being just completely cut off, versus that detail is actually preserved quite nicely on the Pixel 10 Pro. Same thing with the satellite dishes, and the overall image in the background over here is definitely better preserved on the Pixel compared to the iPhone. Next, we have our Toy Traders shot in Langley, BC, and here you can see that we have a lot of details in this scene. We're shooting with the main wide-angle cameras, and if we zoom in to this Gundam box over here on top of the shelves, you can see that we do have a little bit more clarity on the Pixel 10 Pro versus the iPhone Pro Max. Just the text and the overall sharpness of the image is a little bit better retained on this particular scene compared to the iPhone on the Pixel 10 Pro. And the same example happens over here where we zoom in to these Funko Pop figures at the end of the store, where we could definitely render out more sharper details, versus it's pretty fuzzy and blurry if we start to zoom in. And by the way, this is like zoomed in like at least like 1200%, so very zoomed in to the 50 and 48 megapixel images, but in good lighting situations, looks like that extra 50 megapixels definitely renders out a little bit sharper detailed in distant objects. And the same thing kind of goes for the telephoto stills capabilities. Here we have young Anakin Skywalker, where we have a little bit better details preserved in kind of his head scarf area, the helmet, and look at the texture on the glasses themselves. Much better preserved on the Pixel 10 Pro versus on the iPhone. It looks a little hazy and a little washed out, and I made sure that the lenses are clean on both smartphones before shooting, of course. But generally speaking, in good lighting situations, I do find that the Pixel 10 Pro does render out a little bit sharper details in the photos. Now we're outside facing the bridge, and we can see that in terms of general color rendition, both are actually quite similar for the most part. Sometimes the Pixel's a little bit warmer than the iPhone, depending upon how it sets its white balance, but generally both on the wide angle side deliver some great looking images. Now once we start to zoom in a little bit, using the 5x optical zoom, we could actually see again that the Pixel 10 Pro is delivering slightly sharper contrast ratios and better, crisper details on that telephoto camera. And if we punch in at 800%, we can see that illustrated again, where the Pixel 10 Pro is delivering sharper overall contrast levels. You can argue that it is over sharpened to some extent versus the iPhone's a little bit more natural. But as a result of that, the iPhone's to some people might look a little hazier and has more like imaging artifacts from that hazy standpoint, versus the Pixel 10 looks sharper but does have more over sharpening artifacts as a result of that. So both definitely have their limitations and drawbacks. I think if you were to pick which one looks better to most people, they'd probably pick the Pixel 10 Pro since it is sharper and cleaner looking. Now this is a shot where we're shooting directly into the sun onto a skyline. As you can see over here, due to this circumstance, we can actually see that there's a slight advantage of the iPhone being more prone to rendering out more natural looking images with less over sharpening artifacts, and as a result of retaining some of those original details within the image, we are capturing a little bit more dynamic range with some of the darker portions of this skyscraper versus on the Pixel 10 Pro. It does look cleaner and sharper, but it does look a little bit more processed as a result of that. So if you're looking for a cleaner, sharper image that's kind of ready for distribution, the Pixel 10 Pro does a good job of that. But if you want something a little bit more natural, true to life, I think the iPhone definitely has an advantage there. Moving forward, let's talk about the nighttime photography capabilities. Now here we're using the standard wide camera, and straight out of what we're looking at right now, I can definitely see that the iPhone is capturing more dynamic range, more shadow detail, and a decent job of maintaining highlight clarity as well on the standard wide camera. And if we zoom in a little bit on this standard wide setting, you could see that the Pixel 10 Pro definitely has a decent resolution with the 50 megapixels, and it renders out the detail quite nicely as well. The iPhone still looks a little bit more natural, not as sharpened to the initial appearance, but all that detail is still preserved in there, and definitely more shadow and highlight detail preserved as well. So the iPhone is definitely looking a little bit better based on this nighttime shot. Now this is the same angle, but now we're using the 5x optical telephoto lens on both cameras, and we can definitely see that the Pixel 10 Pro has an awesome telephoto. Very sharp, very clean looking image. Yes, there are some over sharpening artifacts, like how it renders out the image, and you can see that the sky is a little bit crunchy in terms of its compression artifacts, and just generally speaking, the iPhone is cleaner out of the box, and perhaps not as sharpened, but if we start to zoom in, you can see where some of that cleaning up of the post-processing is definitely better handled on the iPhone. If you want to go into peep mode, you can certainly see more detail within the iPhone zoomed in image compared to the Pixel 10 Pro. The Pixel 10 Pro doesn't look bad, but starts to break apart once you start to do some pixel peeping. Lastly, I wanted to see how the Pixel 10 handles highlight blooming in a nighttime situation. So here's the signage for the Starbucks, and we can see that better highlight retention is captured on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. You could see both in the water LED lights that are very bright. There's more detail within the water itself, and the Starbucks sign has a little bit more detail around it, and it's less hazy and less blurry within the Starbucks logo itself. Same thing with the buildings in the background, a lot better detail preserved in highlight and shadows, and the colors are a little bit more natural looking and true to life. Next, let's move on to video, and both are recording at 4k60p over here. We're doing a little stabilization test. One thing that the Pixel has always struggled with is stabilization. If you're going to walk with it, you are going to notice some jittery effects, and even with the built-in stabilization and enhanced video stabilization, it still doesn't do as good of a job as the Samsung and iPhone counterparts, and this is certainly no exception. The iPhone 17 Pro Max has pretty amazing both sensor and optical stabilization, and the software also enhances it quite a bit. There's less jittery effects, there's less jello, which is certainly going to be super important for people that are going to be using this thing handheld to shoot videos, which is 99% of people, and definitely definitely a big advantage over here compared to the Pixel 10 Pro. And on top of that, the iPhone is capturing more dynamic range or natural colors and at a higher bitrate. Not to mention the ability to do like ProRes and RAW capturing capabilities with the Blackmagic attachment. So in terms of the video capturing capabilities, it's pretty much no contest. The iPhone is one of the best smartphones out there to capture video. Moving forward on to the telephoto video capturing capabilities, the Pixel 10 Pro really struggles over here with its stabilization. This video, if you're going to watch it on a large screen like I am right now, is very nausea inducing, and there's lots of imaging artifacts, lots of noise, and a not very high bitrate for video versus the iPhone. Looks almost like camcorder like. It's definitely not as going to be good as just having it on a tripod, but for having that sensor shift technology built into that telephoto camera and in conjunction with the awesome imaging processing, high bitrate and high dynamic range of the iPhone, this is certainly the much better video camera when you're using the telephoto lens. Here's some low light video footage over here, and here we're kind of seeing the same thing where the Pixel 10 Pro really crushes out much of the shadow and black details, and the iPhone is still looking pretty awesome in the exact same situation. Lots of shadow and highlight details preserved, and it helps to also have that good image processing where we're retaining much of the natural look of the real life scene. And just a final comparison shot here, we're pretty much in a pitch black alley. There's a small light in the distant background over there. You could see that the Pixel 10 is kind of struggling to actually maintain focus because it has nowhere to actually focus onto. And in the exact same situation, the iPhone footage doesn't look great, but definitely a lot more usable. We can see that we don't have that much noise, and there's quite actually a bit of shadow retention. Some of this is obviously enhanced by the DSP, but generally speaking, this is pretty remarkable how much information there is in a seemingly pitch black scene. But besides that, guys, that's really it. Definitely let me know what you guys think of the Pixel 10 Pro versus the iPhone 17 Pro Max that we have over here. Obviously, the standard iPhone 17 Pro has the exact same camera as the Max version. We're also have a comparison between the 17 Pro Max versus the Samsung S25 Ultra. So definitely check out the channel for that video, or in the description down below. We're also going to have battery life tests for all the latest generation smartphones on the channel as well. But make sure to like and subscribe and have post notifications turned on. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one. Take care.